Just shout out. So today is week 3 of emotional intelligence, and if you did not see week 1 or week 2, all of our sermons are up on tcjakarta.org. They're free. They're accessible 24/7. And we talked about how emotional intelligence is so tied to your success in the workplace. 58% of your success in the workplace is tied to your emotional intelligence. 90% of the top performers are high in emotional intelligence. And it's really, really hard for you to succeed in relationships and to succeed in life if you are emotionally unintelligent. Just trust me. And so part of emotional intelligence that we have been mostly focused on is our self-awareness and our self-management. What do we do with the stuff that we feel? And so that's kind of where we have been. And today I want to talk to you about the setting of your story, because every one of us in this room has a different setting. My setting came from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I grew up in an Italian household. Most of the families around us were Italian. We were Roman Catholic. We all had big noses and skinny legs. And so one of the things that you need to be aware of, and I think a lot of us are either naive or ignorant of, is just how shaped you are and the person that you are seated here as a young adult or an adult, how much of it has been shaped by your family of origin. And your family had a great impact on you, whether you knew it or not. And it is a bit naive for us to think that we cannot go back there and deal with some stuff. Because here it is. Listen, I am not here to bash my family. I'm not here to bash your family. Now, most of our parents did the best they could with what they had and what they knew. And a lot of parents made a lot of great sacrifices for us. But there is no such thing as a perfect family. Your family was not perfect, and my family was not perfect. And there are some flaws, and there were some failures, and there were some things that we learned in our childhood that we have carried into our present moment that is keeping us tied to the past. And part of self-awareness is discovering those things in our past that are keeping us held prisoner to our past instead of living a full life free. And what are the 3 things that we are? Healthy, growing, and full of love. This is what God's called us to be, and this is what God's desire for every one of us. Now, in your family of origin, you learned about how do you handle conflict. You watched your parents do it. You and your siblings, if you had any, you handled conflict in a certain way. In my family, we were conflict avoiders. If you look in the dictionary for the term passive-aggressive, my father's picture is there. He was the classic passive-aggressive person. And so my mom and my dad would argue, and usually was over money. My mom and my dad, neither of them graduated high school. They were always just pas-pasan or below. If you don't know what pas-pasan is, you're just breaking even or you don't have enough. And so they would argue quite frequently about money. And my dad, he would just passively, he would listen to my mom, but he wouldn't really resolve any conflict. They wouldn't have any plan or strategy. And my dad would then go and he would talk to his brother and his sister, my aunt and uncle, and he would criticize my mom. And he would aggressively criticize her and do all these things, but he wouldn't do that in front of her. Now, as I've learned, as I've gone through and done some of this internal work, I see that I have followed in the footsteps of my father as a passive-aggressive person. And so if you are a conflict lover, you like to confront things, I avoid you. I don't like you. No one's laughing. That was supposed to be funny, but you didn't get it. But it really does damage to you when you start leading people and you're not resolving conflicts, but you're avoiding conflicts. And so all of a sudden, I'm in a conflict zone, but I'm avoiding it. I don't want to have those hard conversations. Those are things that I've had to work through, but that is absolutely grounded in my past and things that I have to let go of here and make some changes. Now, you'd have to do the same thing. Another thing that parents are supposed to talk about, and I want to ask you, in your house, did you have to earn love or were you loved unconditionally? Did you have to perform for love? Did you have to have a certain grade? Did you have to do better than your brother or your sister or your neighbor or your sibling or your cousin to earn Papa's love or Mama's love or an affectionate hug or someone to say, I'm proud of you? How did you learn about love in your family? Did you have to earn it, or was it unconditional? Was public displays of affection, were they acceptable in your house? Did they ever hug you? Did they ever, any of that? Was any words of affection ever spoken in your house? What about God? How was God viewed in your house? What were you taught about God? I came from a Roman Catholic background. It was very strict. I feared God, but I didn't know God was personal. I didn't know that God was Emmanuel, that He was with me every step of the way. My mom and dad chose not to talk to me about sexuality. They didn't choose to talk to me about sex. And so I learned about sex when I was 7, 8, 9 years old from my peers in second grade and first grade and third grade. And parents, you are naive to think that your children are not learning about sex from their peers or from the internet. So who better to talk to your children and your teenagers about sex than you, mom and dad? It's part of our responsibility, and I'm not preaching at you. I love you. I'm one of you. But my parents never talked to me about sex. So masturbation and pornography never brought up. I was molested when I was 10 years old. I didn't know that I could talk to my dad or my mom. I didn't know about these things. So I had to learn a lot of this stuff on my own, and can I tell you that I took some very, very unhealthy patterns into my adulthood. Now I want to ask you, like, if you don't think that we have to, and this is the terminology, we have to go back in order to move forward. Because we've got to let go of some of the stuff. We have to deal with some of the stuff from our past so that we can live healthy and growing and full of love in the present. How many of you know to avoid conflict is not healthy? It's not a healthy lifestyle. And so I've had to make changes. I'm getting better, but I'm still not there. It's hard for me. It never comes naturally. My wife is the opposite. My wife loves me. And she wants to resolve conflict, and she doesn't want to rest or not stop until we resolve conflict. Now, this is interesting. I don't know when it was sometime last year, I believe. The team and I, we went on a retreat, and we just wanted to get some headspace. We wanted to get out into nature, do some devotionals, think about things, hang as a team, have fun, laugh, eat together. And we went to Bandung. The Boulets say Bandung, but it's not Bandung, it's Bandung. And we went to Bandung, and part of our trip, we went hiking somewhere, and it was really, really cool. And we, at one point of the hike, it was several kilometers in, we came to a waterfall. And this is the picture of the waterfall. This beautiful scenic nature, and there was this big rock, and our youth pastor got up on the big rock, and he was flexing like youth pastors do. And the backdrop was this beautiful waterfall. Can you make the waterfall out? Can you even see that? And then in the lower left-hand corner, what is there? It's all garbage. People's litter, just throwing it in the stream. And it was this beautiful scenic nature, this scene of nature and waterfall and the sun and the trees and the green. And it was just beautiful. And you could hear the water, and it was just wonderful. And there was all this trash, and it just broke my heart. And I'm like, wow. So, this is what I need you to do. I need you to use your imagination, okay? This is not true imagination. So, let's just say that Bernard was really brokenhearted. That was the scene, that's from my iPhone, right? So that's an actual picture. And what if I said, hey, team, let's go. The collective's just going to go in there, and we're going to just take up all that trash, put it in bags, and let's get it away so it'll just be this beautiful. And so we do that. On day 1, we clean up all that trash, and then we come back on day 2 of our retreat, and we notice that there's not that much trash. There's double the size of the trash. And so then we start picking it up again, and we take it and we haul it away. And then on day 3 of our retreat, we go back to that place hoping and praying that it was all gone, but it was triple the size. There's all this garbage all over the waterfall, at the bottom of the waterfall. So Pastor Alex comes to Pastor Bernard. Fiction, remember? Imagination. Pastor Alex comes to Pastor Bernard and he says, hey, I think we should trek up the stream and see where all this trash is coming from. So we start hiking up the stream. We go up the mountain to the mouth of the stream, and all of a sudden we notice that at the top of the mountain, mouth of the stream, is actually the garbage dump for Bandung. Now, how foolish would it be for us to stay down here and just continue to pick up the trash? You've got to go to the source in order to clean up the trash. Now, there's a lot of things that you are dealing with in your emotions and how you're feeling and the way that you see the world and how you interact with people. And if we don't go to the source, if you don't go to the source, which is the family that you grew up in, and deal with some of the issues back here, you will never be free. And all of your life, you're going to be cleaning up trash at the bottom of the waterfall. But you've never dealt with the source. And today I want to encourage us that to go to the source, to have the courage to do it. This is what Paul's referring to. In 1 Corinthians 13, he says this very eloquently, and he says, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. Now, oftentimes when we are speaking, when we are seeing the world, we're seeing it as that child that grew up. But we have this adult body. But we're emotionally a child. As one person put it, I was a Christian for 22 years, and instead of being a 22-year-old Christian, I was a Christian who was a 1-year-old Christian 22 times. And it never grew up. See, we're naive to think that our past is not affecting our present. And some people will say, well, Pastor, that's under the blood. I'm a new creation. How's that working out for you? How's that working out for you? So the putting away of childish things is our responsibility. It's part of our discipleship. It's part of growing up in Christ. It's part of being more and more like Him. It's part of healthy growing and being full of love, and healthy things grow and growing things change. And so some things need to change in order to foster health and growth. And those things that need to change usually are rooted in our past. And so if I were to ask you, are there things in your past? Because I'm not here to bash families. I'm just saying that your family is not perfect and my family is not perfect. But I've done some internal work to notice that there were some things that I can make a choice today not to carry those into my adult life, not into my family, and I don't want to repeat those same failures. Now, there were awesome things that my parents did for me. They loved and they supported me in every baseball game and every basketball game. They were there cheering. And my mom wore this big, ugly red wig, and I used to hate it, and I used to hate when they came to my games. And she would scream, "Birdie!" And she would embarrass me, and I hated it, but I loved it all at the same time. Now, your story is very, very different than mine, but here's what I want you to see, is you have a story. You have a story, and your story is a setting. Now, there are certain things that happen in your story that may be very different than mine. But nonetheless, we need to go back in order to go forward. Now, I want to read you something from a book by CRON that I strongly recommended and suggested that you read it. And that was The Road Back to You. It is a journey for self-discovery, and it really does help to sort through some of this. And it says, do we see the world? Do you see the world through our eyes or through those of the children we were? What are the hidden wounds? What are the hidden wounds and the misguided beliefs that we pick up as kids that continue to secretly govern our lives from the shadows? And I want you to just look at those two words, hidden wounds and misguided beliefs that we pick up as kids that continue to secretly govern our lives from the shadows. Do you know that that some of the hidden wounds and misguided beliefs. Do you know that most children who grew up in a broken home where parents were divorced, or they were separated, or they lived in, or they slept in different bedrooms and all this kind of stuff, do you know that most children, psychologically, they don't say, I wonder what's wrong with mommy and daddy. They don't sleep in the same bed, or dad hasn't been home for 3 weeks, or mom has been gone for 6 months. I wonder what's wrong with mom. No, you know what it comes across internally as? What is wrong with me? What did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? Why can't they get along? What's wrong with me? What did I do? These are the hidden wounds and these unhealthy beliefs that we carry into adulthood, that we need to go back in order to go forward. Now I'm going to invite my very special guest at this time, because she's going to help us work through some of these issues. And so, Candace Lee Ed, would you come at this time and be my special guest? Would you give her just a thank you for being here and being willing to share your story? Candace, for those who don't know you, what do you do here at the Collective?
I help with our kids ministry on level 7, young, and I also work with Ashley and help her with communications.
Awesome. So how long have you been in Jakarta?
6.5 years.
6.5 years, and not most, but some people out here would believe that you are from Indonesia and you are Indonesian. So where?
Yes, which is a compliment, because I do love Indonesia, but I'm not Indonesian. Just to give a little background story, my family origin, like you were sharing before. I'm from America. I'm Native American. I come from a tribe known as Navajo, and I grew up on the Navajo reservation in northern Arizona.
Awesome. So what I wanted to talk to you about is there were two terms that he used. He said these wounds of our past, and also these misguided beliefs. And so if you could just share your story, and I know that it takes a lot of courage for you to do that, and I just want to thank you again for being willing to do it. But you're going to help so many people, because we all have stories. And could you just share a little bit? I know something happened to you as a child, and so maybe you could just help us understand that a little bit and work through these wounds of our past.
Right. So 2 important things first, just to give context. I have incredible parents. My mom and my dad have always loved me, supported me, encouraged me, been there for me even until now, which is really important to know that. And also, I've always grown up with a deep relationship with Jesus, understanding myself and my identity rooted in Him and being loved unconditionally no matter what. And so with that in mind, 5 or 6 years old, I was molested by someone close to me in my life that I trusted and that I loved. It happened one time. I didn't understand what was happening because I was only 5 or 6 years old. I know I wasn't comfortable. And after this had happened, this person whispered into my ear and said, "Don't tell your mom and dad." Right? And because this is a person that I love and that I trust, I listened to this person, right? Not to go to my parents and tell them what happened. Also because I don't really understand what just happened, right? And that was at 5 or 6 years old. And then after that, at 6 years old, I was in first grade. And during recess time, there was one of my classmates. He used to run and chase me around the playground and flash me his penis. And then he would touch me and tickle me inappropriately. And because this had happened before, maybe I thought this was normal. And because the previous person who had did this already to me told me not to tell my parents, I didn't tell anyone, right? So 5 and 6 years old, those 2 things happened, and I never told anyone.
So what was the terminology is the misguided beliefs, or these lessons that you learned, like about trusting or not telling your parents? Like what were those lessons that you learned? What did you take away from that? And
right.
You were still young, you didn't understand it, but you just instinctively, you just had these beliefs.
Yes. So just like if you guys were here on week 1, Pastor Alex brought up Matt, and they talked about assessments and assertions. So to use the same language, the assessments I made as a 5 and 6-year-old that I didn't know I was making, this is all like subconsciously embedded into my behavior, it was 3 things. The first thing was that I can't trust people closest to me to protect me, because the person that I'm supposed to trust and love did this to me, violates me, and my classmate who's not supposed to do this to their classmate does it, I can't trust people to protect me. So that's number 1. The second one was I can't trust people to know what's happening to me, right? The first time after it happened, my parents didn't see me the next day and say, oh my gosh, what happened to Candy? Candy, you look different. Candy, what's happening, right? After recess, my teacher didn't see me and she wasn't like, Candy, what's wrong? Candy, what happened? Right? So that's the second thing I learned. The third thing, because this person whispered into my ear to not tell my parents, the ones who I loved, who I knew loved me, supported me, encouraged me, who I would naturally go to with things that confuse me or I don't know what this is, I cannot trust to tell people what's happening to me.
So how has that, you haven't revealed your age yet,
Oh, yeah, I will.
so I don't want to do that for you, but you've carried this with you for quite some time, right? So this happens at 6 years old. Now what happens at 13 years old?
So at 13, it's the summer going into high school, and I'm at my grandma's house. I was really close with her, and every time I spent the night with her, it was always in her bed. And so I'm sleeping one night, and then I have a vivid dream of what happened to me the first time I was molested, right? And the thing was, at 5 and 6, I never forgot what happened to me. I didn't block it out. It was just I never talked about it, especially because I didn't understand what happened, right? But at 13, now that it's brought to the forefront of my mind through this dream, at 13, now I understand what happened and that it wasn't okay. So I quickly confronted this person, and thankfully, from 13 and then throughout high school, 3 separate conversations with this person. I was able to forgive them. The relationship was restored, which I'm so grateful for that. And then when but I still didn't talk about it. I didn't talk about it with anyone. And then at 17, after I graduated high school, I moved to San Diego area, and I had my brothers living there, and it was one of their birthdays. They had like this huge surprise house party. Candy's first time drinking.
Woo woo!
And
What happened to you when the first time that
a
you
few
drank?
shots later, Candy got drunk. Candy Loca came out.
We're not proud of it, guys and gals. Parents, don't freak out. We all had our time.
Yeah, and so by the end of the night, I blurted it out to my brothers. My brothers freaked out. They called my mom. And the next day, my mom called me, asked me, is it true? And I said, yes, but I've forgiven this person, and I don't want to talk about it, and that was it.
Okay, so even though you had forgiven the person, but it was still affecting you. As you said, I forgave this person, but how was it still affecting you? Now you're 17, and then you move to Jakarta, and you're a part of this church. How was it affecting you as an adult? What happened?
So I'm 27 now. I turned 27 in December, and this has all happened, right, already, and I've already gone through the process of forgiving this person, and it seemed like everything was fine. So I was like, everything's fine. Candy's like good. And when I was 25 years old, 2 years ago, so I'm here in Jakarta, it just something in me, I couldn't explain it, did not feel right. On paper, my life looked good. I loved my job. I loved living in Jakarta. I had great friends.
Great boss.
A great boss, incredible boss. And
who avoids conflict.
I mean, I avoid conflict too. Anyways, and I was healthy. I'm not worried about like my finances. Yes, I miss my family back in America, but nothing alarming is happening, right? So on paper, my life was okay, but on the inside, it didn't feel okay. So then that was and then because of I don't talk to people about what's going on because that was something that I assessed as a 5 or 6 year old. And I didn't talk about it for like 6 to 8 months with anyone. And then I read this book, and this book talked about how basically it was just the start of a journey of me understanding the whole process of what I learned in that moment when this person whispered in my ear, don't tell your mom and don't tell your dad.
Yeah. So in addition to not being able to share those things with, because that was one of those misguided beliefs, I can't share this with anyone, that's not right. Can you tell everyone, like, how do you feel in a group of people, or how was that affecting you when you would be at church and you'd have a group of people? Like, how did you feel inside?
Like with my relationships or with being in...
Just being in the lobby out there and you've got a couple hundred people scurrying around.
Yeah, big groups of people is very overwhelming for me, which is kind of like an oxymoron because I work for a big church with lots of people that I do love. And but it is really overwhelming for me. During services, when they come up here, they do the welcome, the greeting, and they're like, give someone a high five, give them a hug, tell them I love you, or I'm so happy you're here today. Most of the time, I'm like, okay, like I can do it, but it's like, it takes so much energy out of me. But there are times, like last Sunday, I just walked out of service because I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
So last Sunday, Pastor Alex said, I want you to look at the person next to you right in the eyes and tell them that you love them, and she just ran right for the door and got out of the service.
Yeah.
So what was, as we kind of wrap that up, what were some of the tools that you used? Because this is a journey, 6 years old, then something happens at 13, then something happens at 17, now you're 25, and Jakarta in this process is starting. And so what were some of the tools that helped you now during that time?
Yes, so the book that I talked about earlier that I first read, Pastor Bernard has referenced it a few times. It's called Scary Close by Donald Miller. And it's about the author where he goes through a similar process of like trying to figure out what's going on with himself. But basically he talks about how you have your true self, and then because of some experience, usually in your early childhood, you develop this false self as a protective armor to shield yourself because in the world, you've learned that you're not safe, right? So that's Scary Close. It has been and still is incredibly helpful because it talks about the intimacy that we have in our relationships with our spouses, boyfriend, girlfriend, our siblings, our parents, all of that. And then, so that's the first one.
And can you just tell us about Brian?
Oh. And so a few years ago, how it has affected my relationships, right?
Yeah.
It has affected it two ways with people. Even though I have people close to me in my life, I've always had great support systems. But because of what I learned as a 5 and 6 year old, that I couldn't trust people, I just cut everyone off. Everyone just ended up on the chopping block. Everyone was at arm's length within myself, like my parents, my siblings, my best friends, and people even here that I consider myself really close to. They just, because I can't let them in, right? Because if I let you in and I get hurt, it's not your fault, it's Candy's fault, because Candy learned not to trust people, right? So it's my fault I let you in. So that was one thing. And then a few years ago, there was this guy that I met, Brian, the one you referenced, when I was living in San Diego. He was in the Navy. We dated. I really liked him. I was interested, and he felt the same way. He like poured his heart out to me and was like, Candy, I want to be with you. Like, let's do it. And then without even like questioning it, I just cut him off and didn't think or feel anything about it.
Not to make
Until
light,
now. Now I feel bad.
not to make light of it, but have you ever stalked him on Facebook?
No.
I think we
But that's
all
a
should
good-
stalk Brian
That's a
on
good
Facebook.
idea. I might do it. Just kidding. No, I won't.
So Scary Close was one of the tools that you used.
Yes.
Because we cannot continue to hold people at an arm's distance. And so
Yeah.
you're working your way through that. So Scary Close helped you. What other kinds of tools did
And
you
then
use?
the road back to you, the one you talked about earlier, me reading that book and reading about my Enneagram type, it put a lot of language to what my experience was, what I was thinking in my head, what I was feeling in my heart. It just really, really helped me. And then the most recent has been The Gifts of Imperfection by Dr. Brene Brown.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Would you just thank Candy? So one of the things that Brene Brown talks about in The Gifts of Imperfection is the whole power of shame. And so a lot of what Candy has felt, and every single person in this room, we deal with shame at some level. Shame is this intensely powerful feeling, and if you could just put up Dr. Brown's definition, shame is this intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and acceptance. It's this, I am not enough. There's something deeply flawed. And every single one of us in this room deals with this feeling at different levels, but we're all dealing with shame. And she puts a lot of things forward to help us move through it and work through it. And as you can see, Candy is in a journey. And I want to encourage you, a lot of this stuff, it happens as a process. A lot of it doesn't just happen. We wake up all of a sudden and we feel differently, or we have to go back in order to go forward. And some of it is facing why we even feel this way, or why we're feeling shame. I want to just put another snippet from the book, The Gifts of Imperfection. Shame needs 3 things to grow out of control in our lives. It's like a cancer that metastasizes and will just spread through our entire life, especially our relationships and our emotional health. But it needs 3 things, and that is secrecy, silence, and judgment. That judgment usually comes from you yourself. You judge yourself as unworthy. You judge yourself as flawed. You judge yourself that God could never love you, no one else could ever love you, and you hold people at a distance, or you don't find it very easy to be close or have true friendship and deep friendships where you're able to share heart to heart with another human being. Secrecy and silence and judgment. Now, the thing that breaks us out of the secrecy is that there has to be someone in your life that you can share your story with. And when I say share your story with, I'm not asking you to do like Candy did today and get up in front of a couple hundred people and share your story. But I am asking you, and what is absolutely shame-breaking and breaks the power of shame is when you have the courage and the connection with another person that you can share your story with. When they can listen to you and they can extend the grace and the love of Jesus Christ, it breaks the power of shame over our lives. It's as simple and as difficult as that. It takes a lot of courage, and I want to just end our time together. Shame happens between people, and it heals between people. I need you to get that. You're not going to solve your shame issues by yourself. It loves secrecy, and it loves silence, but it hates connection. Shame happens between people. We do things to one another that hurt one another deeply, even as parents, siblings, as friends, as colleagues. We hurt one another. Shame happens between people, and it also heals between people. If we can find someone who has earned the right to hear our story, we need to tell it, because shame loses its power when it is spoken. I want to challenge you today. Do you have anyone in your life that has earned the right to hear your story? Do you know of someone that you could share your story with? If you would actually search your heart and search your relationships, and you would say, I honestly don't have a single person I could share my story with. And I'm going to offer myself to you and say, you can share your story with me. I'll be a safe person for you. If you're a female, my wife will join me. In a few moments, we're going to sing a chorus, and it says, sin was strong, but Jesus is stronger. My shame was great, but Jesus is greater. And I really do sense that Jesus wants to break the power of shame over us and in us, and whatever's working in us, whatever's keeping it secret or silent. And you perhaps may have learned that we don't talk about such things in family. That's what you learned in your family. We don't talk about those things. We cover them up. They're shameful. We don't air our dirty laundry for everybody. And I'm not asking you to do it with everybody. I'm just asking you for one trusted friend who's earned a right to hear your story. Would you let me pray for you and for us as a family? We're going to close our time. Lord, I thank you so much that we do have people around us. We're not on an island all by ourselves, but you have connected us to a community called the Collective. A collective is a gathering of people who are committed to one purpose. Lord, you've connected us. We have people around us. We have relationships that we can connect and we can tell our story. So, Lord, today I'm asking you to give us the courage as individuals to trust somebody to tell our story, to break the power of shame. And that for every single person in this room, that shame still has its power because it's still in silence and it's still in secret, and we're secretly judging ourselves as unworthy of love and acceptance because we're fatally flawed. Jesus, I pray that you would come with your truth and your healing word to us as individuals. That you would put your courage within us, Lord. Within the next days and the next week, we're going to share our story. We're going to see the power of shame broken, that we might be healthy, that we might be growing, that we might be full of love. God, thank you so much. Lord, even as we take time to go back to the bottom of the waterfall, we go to the source of that garbage, begin to make solid choices, the things that we want to carry in to our lives and our relationships and to our families.